Hello, good evening and welcome. This is Bob Campbell on The Real Review, Marlborough and Central Otago wine tasting. This is my first webinar, so I hope you'll be gentle on me. We've got 173 participants now, I'm told, so welcome along. If you want to order wine and replay tastings in the future, if you go to our website, The Real Review, and click on seller door to door, you can go straight and order the wines off the wineries. We hear that many of you with us tonight have ordered from wineries, but if you haven't, if you're not in that case, otherwise open a bottle and sip along. This is an interactive format, so I'm going to taste two wines and then invite questions straight away, and then pick a couple of questions to answer, and then we'll go along to the next two wines. So we'll just see how that goes. Now, wine number one is Tohu Sauvignon Blanc from the Awatere Valley, 2019. Let me just pour a little glass. Tohu opened its doors about 20 years ago, and it's the world's then it was the world's first Maori-owned wine business. They've been joined by a few others now, but they're still certainly one of the largest players. Their focus is on the Awatere Valley and the Moutere, the upper Moutere in Nelson. So two very premium wine areas. The wines, to me, really, if I think of Tohu, I think of honesty, wines of integrity, wines that express variety and place, and also wines that punch well above their weight in terms of value. Before I taste the wine, I'd like to just say something about the profile of the flavor profile of Sauvignon Blanc. That's a photo. I hope you can see that all right. That's a photo of Marlborough Sauvignon Blanc, a bunch of ripe grapes just before harvest. And if you reached out and touched one of those and plucked one of those grapes off and popped it in your mouth, it'd be quite sweet, rather nice to eat, and full of passion fruit, tropical fruit flavors. Now, if we turn that same bunch over to the other side, we get quite a different aspect. We now got sort of smaller, denser, greener berries, and these have a grassier taste. They're less sweet and higher acidity, and have sort of flavors like capsicum, gooseberry, tomato leaf. Now, when that bunch is picked and goes into the winery and is pressed, those flavors run together. And that's the essence of Marlborough Sauvignon. It's a contrast between the right tropical fruit flavors and the greener, grassier, edgier flavors. And they can do various things in the vineyard to make that gap more extreme or to narrow it. We're in the Awatere Valley here. So it's a cooler than the bigger Wairau and Southern valleys. So the pendulum swings toward the greener end of the spectrum. I must say, I once described, this is about 20 years ago, I described in an English wine publication the experience of drinking Marlborough Sauvignon Blanc as it was like jumping into a bottomless pit of gooseberry leaves strapped to Elle Macpherson. And I guess that would have been an Awatere Valley wine, because they are the gooseberry sort of end of the spectrum. That description went a bit viral, and it still comes back to haunt me to this day. Let's now try the wine. Typically pungent, they sort of jump out of the glass. You know, you're having a tasting of Marlborough Sauvignon, or if someone's having a tasting of Marlborough Sauvignon, there's a lot of glasses open, and you walk into the room, and the air is full of this passion fruity, grassy aroma. seem to have misplaced my spittoon. However, that's being all right. So that I thought that's delicious. That's it's tangy Sauvignon with a strong Awatere signature, thanks to gooseberry, tomato leaf, oyster shell, and subtle passion fruit flavors. Lovely purity and a really refreshingly crisp finish. That just screams out the Awatere. And in 2019, which was a pretty good vintage, a very good vintage, in fact, in Marlborough for Sauvignon, in 2019, there was some low acidity, so so ripe that a lot of wines, or some wines, actually lacked acidity, I felt. But this is, you can't fault this wine on acidity. It's got that lovely line of acid that just gives it so much energy and life. We rated it 95 points, and it came first out of 15 Sauvignon Blancs from the Awatere Valley. Drink it 2020 to 2024, although I have a weakness for mature Sauvignon. A wine like of this quality, I think, it will change, but it could offer a lot of pleasure after a decade or even two. And quite recently, I've been trying some mature Marlborough Sauvignon and thoroughly enjoying them. And if you're not sure whether you like Marlborough Sauvignon or not, it might, if you think it's too acidic or too punchy, too fruity, enjoy it when it's got a few years under its belt, and you get a far more mellow, almost Chardonnay-esque Sauvignon, which can be actually a good food match. In fact, in Food Match, the folk at Tohu recommended for this a sticky salmon with coconut and spring bean salad. Gosh, that sounds nice. I'm certainly a fan of salmon, and my smoked salmon goes beautifully with Marlborough Sauvignon and would go wonderfully with this particular wine. But so that's something to look forward to. Now, the second wine we've got is Huia Pinot Gris 2019, also from Marlborough. Just put this down. So here we go. I'll just put my glass up. Now, Huia, I'm rather attached to Huia. I live in Huia Street in Devonport, so a nice synergy there. Huia is a family winery owned by Claire and Mike Allen, and they had their first vintage in 1997. They're both winemakers, so that's an interesting dynamic. I wonder if that adds or detracts from marriage. Mike worked at Cloudy Bay and Vavasor, while Claire was at Corbin's and Lawson's Dry Hills, and before they started their own business. They've also made wine and champagne at Veuve Clicquot and Taittinger, which rather explains why they make such a terrific sparkling wine. We're not tasting that tonight, but a very good method is Huia, excellent stuff. They're seriously into organic and biodynamics, and they're founding members of the Mana, M-A-N-A, wine growers, a collective of Marlborough organic wine producers. Now, an interesting thing, 4 of the 8 wines we're having tonight are biodynamically grown, and that's still a relatively small feature of the New Zealand vinescape, but it's growing rapidly. But the interesting thing is we chose these wines on merit, on quality, and 4 of them are biodynamic and organic. So it rather supports those who believe there is a strong link between quality wine and biodynamics. I should mention their vineyard is in Raupara, and so quite stony, free draining soils. Let's taste the wine. Yeah, that's the first thing that the first characteristic that jumps out to me is the texture. It's got this lovely, rich, mouth-filling texture, and it's a dry wine. It's not a sweet wine. It's not pumped up with sugar. It's absolutely dry and very, very flavoursome. I got pear, quince, ginger. Perhaps that's gingery. The wine left on the lees, they get those sort of nutty, slight nutty, gingery characters. That's the sauce there, I would guess, and also some nuts. Dry but not austere, and with a perfect thread of fruity acidity. Pinot Gris, which is of course Pinot Noir, genetically the same as Pinot Noir, is is not a very flavoursome grape, and reasonably low in acid. So it's the way to build flavour in Pinot Gris. The typical way winemakers would build flavour would be to leave the juice and the skins to steep together for a period, but it also extracts, unfortunately, tannins. So you can, that technique has resulted in quite a few Pinot Gris having some spiky, coarse texture, some spiky tannins on the finish, but they've avoided that here. It's got flavour aplenty, but the texture's smooth, and a nice level of acid coming through, nice fruity acid, not hard acid, good acid. Very, very, very tasty wine indeed. We rated it 92 points, which gave it 9th ranking out of 39 2019 Marlborough Pinot Gris. I think 2019 is a pretty good vintage for Marlborough Pinot Gris generally. Drink to 2024, and the food match, and this absolutely sounds delicious to me, is rocket pear Parmigiano pine nut salad with leek risotto. Yum! That sounds terrific. Oh, I'm not going to argue with that one. Now I'm going to take 2 questions from Q&A. See if I can. How's Marlborough Sauvignon different from Sancerre? That's an interesting question. How does Marlborough Sauvignon differ from Sancerre? I would say it's dangerous to generalize, but I'm going to do exactly that. I would say Sancerre tends to be less opulent, less fruity, more steely, more minerally, whereas the Marlborough Sauvignon has this wonderful explosion of fruit that makes it stand out in a crowd. So a little bit more austere. I think in some ways Sancerre can be a better food match, because whereas Marlborough Sauvignon really is great to drink without the complication of food, good with food too, but not quite as austere as Sancerre and Pouilly-Fumé. Let's have a look. No need for a spittoon, just drink. Well, yes. I think I'll save myself. What food would you match with these 2 wines? Well, I've done the food match. Well, okay, here's an interesting question. So thank you. Do I name Morven Macaulay? What do I think about regional variation in New Zealand Pinot Gris? I think there is significant regional variation. If you take, I have tasted, I should say, great Pinot Gris from Auckland all the way down to Central Otago. As you go north, we tend to get more sort of riper, opulent, sort of really overtly tree fruit driven wines with lower acidity and often carrying a little bit of sweetness. Further south, the wines become tighter and acidity becomes more pronounced, and you get more minerality, more the wines are definitely tighter. if I had to choose, I don't want to be too tough on, but I really like the Central Otago style of Pinot Gris. I think it's a real winner and has the potential to age reasonably well too. Anyway, that's enough time we've got for questions. Let's move on now to wine 3, which is an interesting wine, as they all are, of course. Quartz Reef. So this is 2018 Quartz Reef Grüner Veltliner from Central Otago. This is a wine produced by Rudi Bauer, who's a native of Austria, and Grüner Veltliner is a native of Austria. Grüner Veltliner is the most produced grape variety in Austria, and Rudi Bauer is the ideal winemaker for this wine. I call Rudi the wine emperor of Central Otago. He's a larger than life figure down there, and is sort of leads rather than follows. I'm going to put it that way. He's very into organic and biodynamic. So this is another serious biodynamic producer. And the wines are grown, or the grapevines are grown on their steeply sloping vineyard in Bendigo. I should stress that they make great Pinot Noir, great Pinot Gris, and great Méthode in those same vineyards. This is the first vintage of Grüner Veltliner, so it'll be interesting to follow it along, but it's certainly hit the ground running. I think it's a lovely wine. In fact, I recently bought a case of assorted Austrian Grüner Veltliner, and I'm about halfway through it, and every wine I've had, I think this is better than the few wine bottles I've had out of the case so far. So, well, interesting stuff. Beating them in his own game, at their own game, is a bit of a triumph for Rudi. Let's taste the wine. Grüner Veltliner, there's quite a few anti-Grüner Veltliner people who say that it will never catch on because it's too hard to pronounce. And the Americans have got a solution for that. They shorten it to Gris, which is, I don't know whether that's going to help its popularity, but it certainly it comes off the tongue a bit easier. Let's have a look. Quite a rich color for a young wine. It's delicious. It's got that real wet slate mineral character, which I think is an absolute plus. Citrus and floral flavors, and supported by lovely, soft, seductive acidity. And an ethereal texture. I just think that's an absolutely delicious wine. Well done, Rudi. That's a super wine. We rated it 95 points, and recommend it be enjoyed till 2025. Of course, that's a complete stab in the dark because it's got no history, but interesting to see how that goes. The food match that Rudi's come up with is authentic Austrian Wiener Schnitzel with fresh asparagus and potato gratin, which sounds, you can't argue with that. That sounds pretty smart to me. So perhaps we'll try it this weekend. Next, we're going to a Cloudy Bay Chardonnay. Oops, we better swap that round. We've got Cloudy Bay Chardonnay 2017 from Marlborough. Trying to do all the right things and keep the label to the front. There we go. When I last checked, Cloudy Bay was the most searched for New Zealand wine brand. That was at Wine Searcher, and few people need reminding that Cloudy Bay put New Zealand Sauvignon Blanc on the world wine map. We owe them a great deal for that. Some wine drinkers do need to be reminded, of course, that Cloudy Bay makes terrific Chardonnay, Pinot Noir, and Méthode. It's not a one wine company, even though it built its reputation on Sauvignon Blanc. So I think it's important to get that fact across. 2017 was a challenging vintage in Marlborough, quite wet vintage, and not that Marlborough doesn't really do bad vintages, but it just had a little bit of a struggle with 17. That's not a problem for Cloudy Bay. They've got very high standards and great resources, so they can be very, very selective. And this wine seems to have come through with flying colors. Let's have a taste. Wow, that's great. It's a really weighty Chardonnay with great concentration. I think a lot of some of that concentration comes from the Mendoza clone of Chardonnay that's used to make this wine. It gets a hen and chickens, they call it. It's a lot of small shot berries in the bunch, and those are intensely sweet and intensely flavorsome. So they build up the flavor of the wine, the intensity of the wine. And it really does produce a very bold style of Chardonnay. But that's supported by assertive acidity that keeps the sweetness and richness in check. And I've got grapefruit, citrus, struck flint, green apple, and bready yeast lees characters all add to the sort of rich tapestry in this wine. It's not a simple wine at all. There's a lot going on. And I thought the acidity and the sort of flinty mineral edge to it reminded me of quite Chablis-like, which is a style I rather enjoy, a style of Chardonnay I rather enjoy. We rated it 95 points, which ranked 4th out of 48, 2017 Chardonnays from Marlborough. And I recommended to drink by 2024, but once again, that's fairly conservative. That's 7 years. No, it should be in good shape by then, but it could go further with careful cellaring. Food match. The Cloudy Bay people say freshly dug spuds, butter poached bream, and a fish called wrasse, W-R-A-S-S-E. I'm not even sure whether I'm pronouncing that correctly. I'd never heard of a wrasse, and in fact Googled it and discovered a sort of a very colorful reef fish. And so I'm none the wiser, but the spuds and the poached bream certainly are a great match for this particular wine. Now we move to the reds. After yeah, we do some more. Oh, sorry, we've got 2 more questions here, or questions. Can I comment on how barrel fermented New Zealand Sauvignon Blancs? Excuse me, I'm just going to read these questions. Well, I'm just fascinated by, I'm not picking the easy questions here, but I'm picking certainly the more interesting ones. I like this. Would you say the challenge with Pinot Gris is to create this is from David Strada, an old friend of mine, to create a dry wine that has texture? Is that the real challenge of Pinot Gris? Might a really good Pinot Gris be more difficult to grow and make than Pinot Noir? And that's a very interesting thought. it should never occurred to me. But yeah, Pinot Gris is a challenging wine to make really well, and I think 10 years ago there weren't a lot of really good Pinot Gris around in this country, but since then it's really stepped up, and now the wines are more flavoursome. They tend to be drier, and are richer with more weight and body. As for whether it's more difficult than Pinot Noir, you know, you've got to think sometimes that there's nothing more difficult than making great Pinot Noir. So I'd sort of back off supporting that thesis, but but certainly certainly there's a degree of difficulty in making a very good Pinot Gris. Chilled. Okay, why are more people not barrel fermenting Sauvignon Blanc? Section 94 is a standout for me. I think there's a lot more barrel fermentation than we're aware of. I think barrel fermentation and a barrel fermentation of a component of Sauvignon Blanc can add texture and weight and richness to the wine without detracting from the aromatics, which is what Sauvignon Blanc is all about to many people. So I think we're seeing more and more of a higher and higher percentage of as much as 5 or 10% of barrel fermented Sauvignon around now. As far as the full-throated barrel fermented Sauvignon, such as Dog Point Section 94, there are a number around. They're in small production wines, and they're for sort of geeks like me and Christopher Miley, who's obviously a fan of that style. So I think there are a lot of good barrel fermented wines around. Even Tecoco is a full-on Cloudy Bay Tecoco is a sort of benchmark wine for me. But a number of more adventurous winemakers really are adding those barrel fermented wines to their armory, and they're proving to be very popular. It's taking Sauvignon to the next step. All right, let's move on now to the reds, and we're going to start with Fromm 2017 Churton Churton Pinot Noir. So used to screw caps, I was trying to. There wasn't one there. Here we go. Distinctive Fromm label. European style meets New Zealand ingenuity. They advertise on their website, which I think is absolutely sort of sums it up. This is started by a Swiss winemaker, George Fromm, who's with the very help from the very capable Swiss winemaker Hatch Calborough. And Hatch has been around the New Zealand wine scene for a long time, and started with Mataferro. He was with Mataferro for a long time, and has been with Fromm since the first days in 1992. I think was their first vintage. You can tell they're a serious Pinot Noir, serious about Pinot Noir, because they're not a big winery, but they make 7 Pinot Noir labels. The most famous is Claven, which was the first hillside vineyard in Marlborough, and has produced many fantastic winners in its time. I can remember buying a magnum of from Claven Pinot. I can't remember the vintage. It was in the late 90s, and I bought it at an auction, and opened it almost immediately, and it was just fantastic. It absolutely changed my view. It's one of the sort of most memorable wines I've ever enjoyed, because it just showed me what Marlborough was capable of, and just fantastic wine. The Churton is an organic biodynamic vineyard in the Waihopai on the crest of a ridge. It's quite a cool site with clay soils, good rich clay soils, Pinot Noir country for sure. And it produces serious, structured, long-lived wines. Let's check that this is exactly that. That's terrific. That's a real Fromm style, delicately scented. Really has got quite a lovely aroma, a sort of floral violet, cherry, spice anise, and some dried herb flavors. Just a really elegant, supple wine with a fine tannic structure that's going to help it age. There's no rush with this wine. What have we estimated? 2024. That's 7 years. It's capable of much more than that with careful cellaring. It does have a cork, so you take that risk into account. We rated it at 95 points, which gave it 7th ranking out of 122 2017 Marlborough Pinot Noirs. The food match is wild venison, which I think would go very well with this wine, or mildly spiced Asian cuisine. It's an interesting, quite a broad brush, that one. They're getting pretty safe with that call. Okay, let's now move to the next red. Which is Rockburn Pinot Noir from 2018 from Central Otago. I'll just pour myself a splash. Yeah, 2018 was an interesting vintage in Central Otago. It was the hottest and earliest vintage on record. And I can remember through the vintage, there was much speculation about what sort of wines are going to emerge from these conditions that we've never experienced before. And the results are all good. I think the 2018s that I've tried have been mostly of a very high standard. So they came through with flying colors. This is from wine from 2 regions. It's from, the majority comes from Parkburn, 88%, which is in the Cromwell Basin area, and the soils are loam over river gravel, and that's 88% came from that, and 12% from Gibbston. Gibbston being a rather cooler site, producing cooler style Pinot Noir, which I know when they first 20 years ago they were slightly herbal, but they with perhaps it's climate change, but certainly Gibbston's getting stronger and stronger every vintage. I'm really particularly enjoying some of the better Gibbston wines, and so it's only got 12% of that, but that adds to the rich tapestry, I guess. Topsoil over alluvial gravels is the soil profile in Gibbston. One thing I did notice when I first tasted this wine, it really opened up in the glass, and it's one of those wines that deserves to be decanted. Whether you use an aerator, which you jam in the top of the bottle, or slosh it into a decanter, is your choice. But it's just worth considering that. It's quite frustrating to discover that the wine's getting so much better, and during the, say, hour or 2 hours it takes to consume it, and if you popped it into a decanter 15 or 30 minutes before you opened it, you would have perhaps enjoyed a higher level of quality throughout. I use these big glasses to aerate the wine. Yeah, as I mentioned before, I think. Let's try it. I think Rockburn used to make really big, rich, almost fruit bomb styles, and they've slimmed down a bit. And I like the new look for Rockburn. It's a more elegant, more classic sort of style of Pinot Noir. Yeah, delicately scented Pinot, floral, violet, cherry, spice, anise, subtle herby flavors. Quite a supple wine with you know, fine tannins and good cellaring potential. Good food wine. It's dry without being too austere, but has layers of flavor that keep expressing themselves. We rated it 94 points, which is 24th out of 96 2018 Central Otago Pinot Noirs. Drink by 2025. And the food match that they recommended was roast duck, wild venison, and once again, mildly spiced Asian cuisine. There we go. I'm a huge duck and Pinot fan, and also wild venison, if you can get it, is great too. I'm not sure about mildly spiced Asian cuisine, but it certainly can handle a bit of spice. Let's have a look at another question or two. What have we got here? Is the Huia really extinct? Ah, is the Huia really extinct? Asks Churton. In the hunt for the wilder people, they reckoned they'd found one. Well, let's hope that they still exist. They're a marvelous bird. If time permits, sort of lovely to hear my view on glassware. Very topical, particularly with the commentary from your fellow M.W. Jancis and the new universal glass. My comments on glassware, this is the glass that I use for my regular tastings, for my routine tastings. It's important to have a standard glass, a level playing field, if you like. I do the tastings in this room and between 10 and 12 in the morning, and limit it to 24 wines. But the glassware, I choose these not because I like the look of them. I don't like the look of them very much, but they express the aroma very, very well, and they do so for just about any wine. The question referred to Jancis Robinson's glass, which I felt very fortunate I was given some samples of, and was able to test drive it. And Jancis and her glass designer ally, claim that it's their glass will improve the quality of any wine. The Sommeliers Association tested it with a whole raft of different wines, and came to the conclusion that indeed it did, except for sparkling wine. I haven't done the test as thoroughly. I didn't have a chance to spend much time with them because I had some wine friends around for dinner, and we were all sitting around the table, and my wife's got this wonderful, huge, extremely heavy candelabra, if you like, great big steel thing, and I had screwed it to the ceiling over the dinner table a couple of days beforehand, and in the middle of dinner, this thing detached itself from the ceiling and destroyed every glass on the table and most of the plates. Fortunately, there was no injuries. But it wiped out my Jancis Robinson glasses, which was a pain. But they're certainly worth having a look at. They're very light, a delight to use, a delight to drink out of, and you know, they sit in the short time I had to spend with them. They did seem to be very good. They're not cheap at $85 a glass, but to summarize my thoughts on glassware, I think it's very important that you have good glassware. It makes such a difference to to the pleasure you can get from wine and the quality of the wine that you drink out of them. And you need to pay, at least $15 or $20 for a stem. I think the difference between a $5 glass and a $15 to $20 glass is really significant. The difference between a $15 to $20 glass and a $150 glass, I think, is narrower if there is a difference. So get reasonable glasses, and aesthetics play as much of a part as anything. Just get glasses that you enjoy the look of, you enjoy handling and drinking out of, but make sure they've got a decent sized bowl, as these have. I hope that's enough from that. Let's move now to the next wine. Which is an interesting wine. This is Smith or Lowburn Ferry Pinot Noir Home Block 2000 from the 2017 vintage. There we go. So this is produced by Smith and Sheth. Smith being Steve Smith, who's well known in New Zealand as a leading light, and was a viticulturist for Villa Maria for a number of years, and then took the helm at Craggy Range and did a good job there. And now he's teamed up with a wealthy Texan investor, wine enthusiast, and they've described themselves as contemporary negotiants. And they buy or borrow great vineyards in Hawke's Bay, Marlborough, North Canterbury, and Central Otago. I suppose they could go anywhere potentially, but that's where they've staked their claim so far. This particular wine comes from Central Otago, from the Lowburn area, and it was a Chinese market garden 150 years ago when the Chinese miners also needed a few veg between shovels. And Steve claims that it's an elevated terrace, and it's very high in organic matter and granulated lime, which is a quality factor with particularly Pinot Noir. And they've selected the best parcels to make just 320 cases. So this is a fairly limited edition wine that they are very excited about. And I think we're going to see a lot more of Smith and Sheth in the future. Here we go. Quite a deep color. Wow. A really sort of vibrant, concentrated wine. Bright cherry, violet, spice, new leather, nutty oak. Lovely acidity and gentle tannins, but they team up with the acidity to give a really pleasantly drying finish. And I'm sure lots of development potential. I don't know, is it my imagination, but does it seem to have the sort of extra richness it would get from higher levels of organic material and granulated lime? I don't know, but it certainly delivers a lot of flavor and an expectation that this wine is going to get pretty exciting with a bit more bottle age. And once again, like the last Pinot, it really opened up as it sat in the glass. And that's a wine that absolutely deserves to be decanted or at least aerated. We rated it 95, and it came 36th out of 125 2017 Pinot Noirs from Central Otago. Very good vintage in Central Otago, 2017. It's just a lot of exciting wines from that year. And food match, the winemaker says duck. That's it. Not duck confit or seared breast of duck, just duck. So who can argue with that? And the last wine tonight. Yes, I have got a glass. Oh, quite a juggling act here, is Burn Cottage, 2017, Burn Cottage Vineyard, Central Otago. I'll pour a little in the glass. This is owned by the Sauvage family. They're a successful cattle, cotton and wheat farmers in Kansas, who also own several fine wine importing and distribution businesses in the US and a German winery in the Pfalz. I met the leading light for that family who looks after Burn Cottage when they first released their first wine, which was about 6 or 7 years ago now. And I was sitting next to him at lunch, and we got on quite well, and well enough for me to say to him, "I'll bet you've got a Harley Davidson." And he turned to me and he said, "3, actually." He just looked like the sort of guy that would ride a Harley. Their secret is a good site, a great site, and just under the Pisa range there, and the use of, and the input from a very, very respected consultant winemaker, Ted Lemon, who owns Literary Wines in California, and he's a legend in his own time. He's made a big difference to this wine, and right from the first vintage, they've just been producing stunning Pinot. It's a 10-hectare vineyard, and it's run biodynamically. So it's let's have a look at it. I never swallow samples during tastings, but it's pretty hard to resist. It is the last wine too, so it's just so damn delicious, with layer upon layer of fruit and savory characters that really defy description. It's not about simple fruit. There's more than that. There's all sorts of things going on. There's a tease of fruit sweetness and gentle tannins, subtle acidity. This is just seriously good Pinot Noir. It's got a bit of that, what we call peacock's tail, a sort of display of complexity on the finish. It really is there, and that to me is the X factor that pulls it above many of its peers. I think that's just a gorgeous wine. We rated it 97. That was 4th out of 125 2017 Pinot Noirs from Central Otago. The food match, they were quite thoughtful about this. That was recommended by the Burn Cottage folk is mushroom dishes which are delicious partners with the savory earth and fruit notes and supple structural elements of the wine. Merino lamb is another they added. So I can't argue with that. And I know where they're coming from with that mushroom and versus the savory elements in this Pinot. Just delicious. I think it's an absolute cracker. Well, I've got time for 2 more questions. Let's have a look. That's an interesting question from Gerard. Why does the majority of New Zealand Pinot Noirs, even many of the good ones, have a fairly short dated drink by window by the various critics, compared with Old World or even Australian, for that matter, Pinot Noirs? I'm not sure that's right, actually. I think the screw caps have expanded our cellaring potential, and certainly when I when I do the estimate for a wine under cork versus wine under screw cap, I take that into account. I think a lot of New Zealand Pinots, particularly in the past, have been very accessible when they're young, and because they're so accessible, it's understandable. People understandably assume that they're not going to go the distance. You know, why keep it it can't get any better because it's so delicious now. And that there's probably some truth in that. I've certainly looked at a lot of older Pinot Noirs, older New Zealand Pinot Noirs that haven't actually got a lot worse, but they haven't got a lot better either. They just have sort of changed, but in terms of scores, probably not gained much at all. I think there's a lot of work going on with, for example, whole bunch, use of more whole bunch in the ferment, that's actually giving our wines more structure, more longevity, more complexity, and possibly less accessibility when they're young. So it's a sort of coming of age thing. I think that's I think we're going through that, into that sort of quite exciting new period in front of us now. So that's, you know, good stuff. Marlborough has developed Appellation Marlborough wines to assert quality for the region, particularly for the Sauvignon Blanc, but Central Otago Sauvignon is delicious, just as Marlborough Pinot Noir is delicious. Do you think New Zealand would ever develop a system like Appellation Contrôlée in France? Well, I mean, in a sense, that Appellation Marlborough wines is doing that unofficially. So I'm sure it's going to happen unofficially when a large number of producers get frustrated at the fact that there's such a variation in quality within their style, such as Marlborough Sauvignon Blanc, and they want to do something about it. And one thing is to draw a line in the sand and say, if you qualify, you can use our symbol and come join the club, and hopefully that will in time become offer a guide to wine consumers. So that's going to happen unofficially. I would doubt if it would ever happen officially. We prefer the sort of let the consumer decide, the free market thing. So yeah, I don't think that's going to happen. Cloudy Bay Sauvignon versus Chardonnay. Is Chardonnay getting more popular? In Japan, MHD sells Chardonnay 25% higher than Sauvignon. Does it reflect the quality of the wine of the grapes or else? If they're getting 25% more for Chardonnay than the Sauvignon, I probably just reflects the market. You know what the market's prepared to pay. I don't really think. I don't know whether Chardonnay is certainly getting more popular, but Sauvignon is still continuing its rise in popularity too, despite the prophets of doom and gloom who believe that the end is nigh and we better come up with an alternative. But Sauvignon is, they say, rumors of its demise are greatly exaggerated. It's stronger than ever. Anyway, I hope I answered that question. A bit of a ramble there. I'm going to close now by saying, if you're not currently a subscriber to the Real Review, now might be a good time to start, and you can check out the many benefits of signing up on our website. To buy any of the wines direct from the winery, I've already reminded you about this, but just once again, go to the Real Review events, cellar door-to-door, click on the events, click on cellar door-to-door, and you can also download a video clip tasting of any of the wines tasted. The Real Review restaurants dinners are on again. The 2nd of July at the Grove is now taking bookings, and you can book on the Real Review website. Tune in again in 2 weeks. This is a final commercial message. In 2 weeks to watch Huia talk about Grenache and blends. I'll be certainly watching that one with great interest.